All right, here we are for another biology video. This is actually going to wrap up the natural selection part of the evolution unit. We've talked about the basic factors of natural selection and we've seen some examples, but in this video we're going to look at the different types of selection pressure, so the different ways that natural selection can work on some other examples of species. Now, but first I want to start out with this idea of survival of the fittest. This is a quick and easy way to sum up natural selection, but it is a little bit misleading because what does fittest mean? People still get the idea that fittest means biggest or the strongest or the fastest. And of course, we are going to talk about some big and strong and fast animals, but it's not always the biggest and strongest and fastest. It can mean many things. And what it means in particular, though, is reproductive success, right? So again, anything that allows you to survive and reproduce more will be selected for and would be considered the fittest, right? And again, so that doesn't always mean what it might mean. It might mean that you are, instead of being strong, you might be sneaky. Sometimes, for example, there's a type of cricket that when the crickets want to mate, they rub their legs together and makes that little chirping sound, right? And the chirping sound is actually supposed to tell the females where the male is so that they can go over and mate. But there's some species of cricket who, instead of chirping, they wait for the other male to chirp. And then when the female's on her way to find that male, this other male, the quiet one, steps in the way and says, "Hi, that was me that was making that noise," and then he will find a way to mate, right? So like that isn't he's not the best chirper. He's not doing anything that would normally be considered the fittest, but he got to mate, and so therefore they still exist and they are successful, right? So anything that helps you reproduce is going to be important. And so there's a few ways of that selection acts. Categories, I should say. There's lots of ways, but a few categories. But as we're going through here, remember, everything in here is about the same four factors: variation, competition. The variations that have the advantage in the competition will get to survive and reproduce, and then the babies should inherit the traits of their successful parents, right? So that story is going to be in the background of all of these other stories. But predation selection, of course, is usually about finding a way to find prey or avoid getting caught. So, of course, the cheetah is a great example of a predator that has strength and speed. And its main prey would be things like antelopes or zebras or whatever it might be out on the plains. Now, the cheetahs are as fast as they are because of natural selection, because being faster meant that you were able to chase down the antelopes better. And so the slow cheetahs don't catch as much food, they don't live as long, they don't have as many babies. The fast cheetahs do catch food, they live longer and do have babies, and over time, the cheetahs get faster. But this is something that we kind of alluded to in a couple days ago, but when the cheetahs are doing that, they are also inadvertently causing natural selection to occur on the antelopes. The slowest antelopes would get caught first. The fastest ones would live longer and have more babies. And so the population of antelopes gets faster as over time. And so the cheetahs evolved in order to catch the antelopes better, and the antelopes evolved to avoid the cheetahs. And so at this point then, the cheetahs now, if you are a slow-ish cheetah, right? Like you're faster than the cheetahs from the previous generations, but you're still not the fastest. If you are the slowest cheetahs, then you are now at a disadvantage. The slowest cheetahs are going to not survive, and over time, the cheetahs get even faster. But as the cheetahs get even faster, then that means that the antelopes have to then evolve, and not to say have to, they will evolve to become even faster as well, because again, the slowest, the ones that used to be fast, are still are not fast enough anymore, and so the whole process continues. This is something called an evolutionary arms race, where basically the cheetah gets faster, which makes the antelope faster, which makes the cheetah faster, and back and forth. Now, At this point now, they are not really evolving to be faster. The cheetahs have pretty much reached the limit of how fast they can go with the bodies that they have. Basically, the cheetahs could maybe get faster if they got stronger, but this would make them weigh more. They'd be heavier, and so they wouldn't be as fast. The antelopes have gotten about as fast as they can get. The best way for the antelopes to get faster would to get longer, skinnier legs, but longer, skinnier legs, eventually they become too long and too skinny, and they would break when the antelope's trying to make quick turns, right? And so until some sort of mutation happens that gives one or the other species an advantage, then at the moment they're at kind of a stalemate. But still, if you're a slow cheetah or a slow antelope, you're going to get weeded out continuously. Evolution doesn't stop. It just isn't moving forward in the way that you might think. So that's strength and speed, of course, and that's the most common idea of predator versus prey. But then there are things like behaviors. Hopefully we'll get to talk more about behaviors. But it's important when we talk about behaviors to remember that humans' behavior is different from animal behavior. And animals don't get to think the way that humans think. And so the zebras who run in herds, or the wildebeest from the video we watched from the battle at Kruger, they stay in herds because their instincts tell them to stay in herds. And instincts means their programming. That's what their DNA programs them to do. And so if you think about it, if you are a zebra or a wildebeest who is antisocial and you don't like to be in the group, or especially in the middle of the group, you like to be on the edge of the group or even outside the group and kind of like a straggler, then you are going to be at disadvantage and you're going to be caught before the other ones get caught. And so over time, the antisocial zebras have died, leaving only the extra social zebras that like to stick together. And so over time, the zebras have evolved to run in a herd, right? And so that's a behavior that evolves, and other behaviors can evolve as well. Defenses, of course, anything that would keep you alive is going to be helpful. We don't get to talk about plants too much, but we got thorns on plants similar to the horns on other animals. But I in particular like the idea of the chili pepper here, right? The molecule in there called capsaicin is the one that it makes the spicy sensation in your mouth. And that is a chemical weapon. That's a sign to other animals to not eat this thing, right? Like if you were some little rabbit going around eating plants and you suddenly took a bite of these things, it would hurt you and you would not do that again, right? Humans are the only species that purposely eats these. There is some interesting ideas about why that would be that we don't have time to talk about right now. But the main point here is that the chemical in the spicy pepper was there. It evolved for defense, right? And so any pepper that made the chemical that was kind of spicy had an advantage, and over time they get spicier and spicier until they are as spicy as they are now. And then finally, how do you avoid getting eaten, or how do you sneak up on your prey? Well, you use camouflage, right? And so again, here you have just some examples of camouflage. The owl, the squirrel, and the jaguar, leopard, they all blend in very well with their environments, right? And kind of like when the evolutionary arms race for the cheetahs, if you were, say, an owl who's looking for the squirrel, you might be thinking to yourself, oh man, why is it so hard to catch these squirrels? Why are they so good at blending in? And that's, of course, because the squirrels that were the wrong color, that didn't match the environment, they were easy to catch, right? And so the owls made it harder for their descendants to catch the squirrels, right? Like the first owls caught all the easy ones, and now all there are left are the difficult ones to catch. But at the same time, the squirrel might be thinking, wow, man, I can't see the owls until it's the last second. Like, why is it so hard to spot the owls? Well, that's because the owls that were easy to spot, the ones that had the wrong coloration, they didn't sneak up very well, and they were easy to spot, and they didn't get much food, right? So again, this is still kind of the predator versus prey evolutionary arms race, but this time on the color of your fur or feathers or whatnot, right? So these are all different versions of predation selection. But it doesn't have to just be things that help you catch food or keep you from getting to be food, right? Anything that makes your body work better, that makes you survive longer, should be selected for. And so we've already actually talked about disease resistance, right? Not in the example of HIV, although I think I've mentioned the example of HIV. We talked about the example of the coronavirus, right? COVID, where if you have a mutation on your receptor, it doesn't match the receptor for the virus to fit, and so the virus can't get in and you are immune, right? And so that is a pressure that allows people with these mutations to live longer in the situation where they're exposed to HIV or to coronavirus, right? Before the coronavirus, this wasn't a helpful mutation. Before HIV, this wasn't a helpful mutation, but once there is a coronavirus, now it is a helpful mutation. Physiology, basically meaning your body just straight up works better. In particular, I like the example of the giant Galapagos tortoise who lives to be hundreds of years because their metabolism has slowed down really, really, really slow. So they barely have to eat or drink, right? This allows them to live longer, but of course, it doesn't allow them to move very fast. But they don't have to move very fast because they're huge and they live on an island where there are no big predators. So there's nothing on the island that could eat them. So at this point, it's in their best interest to be as big as they can and as slow as they can, because the slower they are, the longer that they will live, assuming the humans that visit them don't bother them too much. And then one other example would be these fish that live in Antarctica, and they live in very, very, very cold water, but they're able to survive there because their body makes a protein that will stop ice crystals from forming. So basically, like the protein gets in the way of the molecules of the ice, of the water molecules, and so they can't form an ice crystal, and therefore the fish can live in these really cold waters, right? And so these are things that don't necessarily help you avoid predators or catch food, but these are things that make your body work better, that allows you to survive longer. Finally, we have sexual selection, things that have to do with reproductive success. So again, I started this video by saying that reproductive success is the way that we measure success in general. And so sexual selection is actually a really strong part of natural selection. The most famous example of this would be the good old peacock, right? Why does the peacock have the huge feathers here? Well, that's to impress this one, the peahen, right? Very different looking bird. If you didn't know it, maybe you wouldn't even know that they were the same species. But these birds show something called sexual dimorphism. Di means two and morph means like shape. But whenever you see a species where the males and the females look different from each other, this is an example. This means that there was sexual selection. That the males usually are the ones that are decorated, and it's because the tail for the peacock is trying to advertise their status as a worthy mate, right? Whether they're trying to tell the female that they have really good genes, or they're trying to find a way to show that they will be good parents, because both of those things would lead to healthier offspring, right? Having better genes or taking care of the kids better will make you a better mate and should make you more attractive to the opposite sex. Again, this happens pretty much all the time, because if you are a female of any species, you get to choose which males you reproduce with. And again, on the male side, technically you do get to choose which ones you reproduce with, but it does turn out usually that it's the males that are competing for the female's attention. Now, one of the interesting ideas about this is that it actually can sometimes go against survivability. Having this giant tail makes you easier to catch. It makes you heavier. It gives something for predators to grab onto when they're trying to catch you, right? But that's okay, because it's worth it if it helps you get a mate, right? Because in the end, it isn't exactly about living long. It's just living long enough to have as many babies as you can. So you get a lot of mates. This is an advantage. So again, any of these species where you see males that look different from females. We'll talk in a second about the lion's mane, but of course the big red feathers on the chest of this bird is an advertisement to say, hey, females, I'm over here. Look at how red my chest is. Wouldn't you like to have your babies that also have this nice red chest? Same with the coloration on this bird's head. And birds actually show this a lot. We'll talk more about birds in a future video. But again, the interesting thing is that these colorations make it easier for predators to notice them, right? Like if you're this bird saying, hey, females, look at me, you're also saying, hey, owls and hawks, like, look at me. I'm right here waiting to be caught. The antlers on the deer are sometimes used for defense, but they're mostly used to fight or spar, really. They don't really fight with the other males. They're not trying to hurt each other. They're just trying to prove who's the biggest, baddest male. And the biggest, baddest male is the one with the biggest, baddest horns, or antlers, I guess they're called. And so, again, this is actually good for getting mates, but bad for survival sometimes, right? These are heavy. These are huge things. They get stuck inside of things. Maybe you've seen pictures on the internet. Every once in a while, you'll see these where a deer got stuck, and then it couldn't ever get out, and it just starved to death, and it just died because its horns got stuck in a tree or a bush or something, and it couldn't get out, right? So again, these are things that help you get mates, but they don't always help you survive. And so talking about the lion is actually a really interesting one. The idea would be that the females are attracted to males with larger, darker manes. But why would this be, right? And how would the females know this kind of thing? So, of course, scientists went out and they tried to study this. And what they basically did is they went out and they got samples, blood samples from all kinds of different lions. Every dot on these graphs represents a lion that they got a sample from, right? And so along the x-axis, you have age. The farther to the right you are, the older you are. And then on the y-axis, there's three different ones, of course. There's mane darkness, mane length, and serum testosterone just means how much testosterone is in the lion's blood. So, of course, the higher up you go, the more testosterone, or the longer your mane is, or the darker it is. And one thing that you should hopefully notice is that there is a similar pattern for all of them, right? In general, if you have a long mane, it's also a dark mane, and you have a fair amount of testosterone. Now, and so in the end, it is in the female's benefit to find a male with a larger, darker mane, because that is going to be the one with the highest testosterone. Now, before we get to that, it is important to note that it's not always the case that technically the lion with the most testosterone was that one, or maybe this one right there, right? And they're not the ones with the longest, darkest manes necessarily. However, there seems to be like a cutoff, right? Like somewhere right about there. After that point, it kind of levels off. It doesn't matter how dark or how long your mane is or how much testosterone you have, you're going to live quite a long time. But if you have less than that, then you're going to have a shorter, lighter mane, and you're not going to live as long because you are going to not be as strong. And again, that's why do the females do this? Because high testosterone means a longer life in general. Testosterone means muscle and aggression. Of course, that's an important thing for a lion to have, because most of your life is spent fighting other lions to maintain your territory. But you're going to have, in general, a longer life. And so if you're a female, you would like your children to also have a long life and be strong and big and successful, right? So here's another one of those things where it's kind of like the evolutionary arms race. The females are choosing the males with the longer, darker manes. And so as a male, it's better to have a long, dark mane. But at the same time, if you're a female who, for whatever reason, do a genetic mutation that changes your behaviors, it changes your preferences, maybe you're a female who doesn't do this, right? It's not like the females are sitting around saying, oh man, I'm pretty sure the ones with the long, dark manes are the ones that have the most testosterone. They just choose the ones that they are the most attracted to. So if you were a female who was attracted to long, dark manes, you would have had an advantage, right? If you were a female who, for whatever reason, preferred the males with smaller manes, with lighter manes, if you did get to reproduce with that male, your babies would come out kind of smaller than the ones from the males with the big manes, right? So in the end, it's a disadvantage for a female to choose a male who has a shorter, lighter mane. And so the females are causing the males to evolve, but the males are also causing the females to evolve along with them. Right? And again, this is where this whole idea of sexual dimorphism comes in, that the males end up looking different than the females. But one thing again to point out is that having the long mane makes it really hot. And so it makes your life worse, in fact, to have a huge dark mane. There's kind of sometimes students still come to me with this kind of misconception that the male lions are lazy because they just sit around all day while the females go out and hunt. But the thing is that the male can't really go out in the hot sun and chase zebras all day, because if he did that, he would get too hot and die, right? So he just basically sits around saving up his energy and trying to stay cool until he really has to fight, either for food maybe, or to protect his territory from other species or from another lion, right? So again, there's these things called trade-offs. And those trade-offs don't really, they're not really trade-offs for humans anymore. But the idea of attractiveness, right? Like female lions are attracted to male lions because of their mane. Do humans have these same fitness markers, right? And the answer is they do, because humans do show sexual dimorphism. Males look different than females. And so certain traits are basically advertisements of genetic prowess, or at least what would have been genetic prowess a while ago, before, say, modern technology. But in general, if you're a male and you have a heavy brow ridge, heavy eyebrows, and a really square, large chin, the chin on this dude, right? It's like made out of rocks. Having wide shoulders, these are all advertisements that say, I have good genes. My kids should also come out big and strong and be able to survive in the struggle for existence. But of course, the thing is that these things don't actually help in the struggle for existence. There isn't an actual benefit to having really heavy eyebrows and a big chin, right? In a way, what they're basically saying is, look at me. I have such good genes that I can waste energy to build this thing that I don't even need, right? That's how awesome I am, right? For the females, having a small chin and high cheekbones and wide hips, these are all traits that say, look at me, I will be a good mother, right? The interesting thing, though, is that these traits don't actually mean success anymore, right? These are left over from our evolutionary past. And in fact, nowadays, it doesn't matter how big your hips are, or what size your chin is, or whatever it is, because actually these things don't even correlate to reproductive success anymore. Basically saying that just because you have these heavy brow ridge that says, look at me, I'm going to make good kids, it actually doesn't mean that they'll make good kids anymore. But the advertisement says that, and again, we're kind of stuck with this evolutionary behaviors that make you attracted to whatever you're attracted to. And nowadays, it doesn't matter, which brings me to Jack Black, right? Jack Black isn't your traditional Hollywood, actor, model type person, but he seems to be pretty successful because he has different traits, right? He's the funny guy, and being funny is also an attractive trait. So being funny doesn't help lions, but being funny will help humans, right? And so in the end, again, the idea is that it doesn't matter exactly what traits you have as long as you can make them work for you. Because in the end, if you can end up being successful, then your trait was actually a good trait to have, right? And so, of course, these are just some examples of natural selection, and we're going to continue talking about how natural selection has shaped species as we go forward.